Welcome to the Good Ride. I'm James Beastie. This is poor Dimitri. He never made it back. And this is the Nidecker gun, a board that isn't quite a daily driver for most, and it's hard to throw around on smaller groomers, tighter spots. And while it is long, stiff, and aggressive, it is not as hard and technical to ride as you would think for being a 174. It's the kind of board I love for making higher speed, wide open groomer turns and riding in super deep, low angle powder. And if you do, you're gonna love this board. So let's get into it. I rode this primarily with Nitro Team boots, but I also got on the Nidecker Rift Pros and then my Union Force bindings. I got this at the end of the season, very late spring, with less than ideal groomers, even first thing in the morning. I didn't really get the experience that I'd hoped to with this board, but I want to talk about the experience I had, and if you get good conditions, you're going to love this thing because it still shined even in the shitty conditions I had. And just so you know, this is an honest, objective review, and I can do that thanks to reader support from people like yourself, and especially our sponsor, Blower Board Shop. They've been selling to snowboarders longer than most resorts have been allowing snowboarders on the hill, so they are very deserving of your hard-earned cash. So if you want to support honest, objective content, click through our links to Blower Board Shop and buy something. It would be greatly appreciated. Now let's talk sizing. This is a huge board. It's a 174, but it's not very wide, and it's very easy to manage and turn for this length. Yes, it feels long and big, but it really was ideal for my size 9 boots, and you want to ride this really long. They only have one size, so it's more for riders closer to my specs. I really wouldn't go over a size 10 boot with this board. You might start getting close to booting out. It's the exact opposite of a short wide. When it comes to shape, this is very directional, but not very tapered. There's only 8 millimeters of taper, so the tail isn't much more narrow than the nose. The setback on side cut's only 35 millimeters. But the setback on board is tremendous. And that's what gives it such a snow surf feel to me. And that's what I like about this. It feels more like you're on a surfboard where you're riding closer to the tail. Let's talk camber profile. There isn't as much camber as you would think. It runs pretty much from the tail to a little bit past the inserts and then transitions up into rocker before this really long nose. So while it feels like a lot of board on snow, and it is more technical and locked in than your average free ride board, just because of its length, it's not that bad at all for a board this size. And there really is only 108 centimeters of actual contact with the snow. Most of this nose is off the snow. That's actually less than the new Nidecker Megalite at 109 centimeters. So while it's long, there's not a lot of board on snow, but it's still more for advanced expert riders because a board this length is just hard to manage, throw around. It's a little more difficult to skid a turn because there's so much board to move around. So when you get off your game, it's a little more challenging. And there is also an effective edge of 127 centimeters. So when you're engaging the side cut and committed in a turn, it does feel like a lot more board than the Nidecker Megalite at 119 centimeters. So it can feel like more board in some places and less board in others. Let's talk edge hold here. There's not a lot going on disruption wise, but there's a lot of side cut. So when it's all engaged, it holds pretty well. And then you have this older school type of sandwich construction that creates a really narrow edge at the end here. So it really sinks in and grips well for what it is. It's still not an ice specialist, but it's gonna handle ice patches and harder snow like the morning spring snow I had, and it gripped well enough. Let's talk Nidecker gun flex. First off, let's look at the overall flex. Very stiff. You go down to the tail, it's incredibly stiff. Flip it around on the nose and it's really soft. This is where most of the flex is coming from.
as you get to this point on back, it's all just incredibly stiff. It's old school stiff, like in the 2000s. But if you go from here, it takes a lot of work to engage this on an ollie, and you don't get that flexy feel until you put your hand up here towards the nose.
To elaborate more on flex, this isn't really the kind of board you want to butter and play around with. It's a big ass board made mainly for turning, but despite its stiff flex, I could lean into the tail a little bit and get it to rise up a touch, but it wasn't easy. And if I wanted to flip it around and nose butter, it could do it as well. This stiff flex isn't easy to ollie, and this isn't a board for side hits, but there is a little bit of tail. If you see a nice easy hit off piste in some wide open terrain, you are gonna have some landing gear. Now, when you get this stiff flex out in uneven snow, it is so stiff between the feet. It handled all that soft, uneven, sometimes wet spring snow, no problem. And even though there is a much softer nose, this stiff area here and this somewhat damper construction did a great job at absorbing that chatter. It got really quiet when it got down to between my feet here. And then also, I just love the way this handled that hard, uneven snow. I thought this stiffer flex might be cranky like some boards are in those conditions, and it wasn't that bad at all. So I think overall, this is a great all-day ride as long as you're not turning through moguls. This sucks for that, and it can become fatiguing. Now let's talk turning. I only had a few runs that weren't that great to really get a taste of what this would be like in wide open conditions. But years ago, I owned a board called the Nidecker Legend in a 168, and I tried my friend's 174. Those boards just lit up. This reminds me a little bit of those old boards, but in a little bit more of a snow surfy package. What little I could get out of this in these conditions just lit up. This would be amazing in good, clean, wide open groomers. So the spring out of the turn is exceptional, especially for being this stiff of a flex. Once you get it going, it really just starts to pop you out of the turn, and I loved it. This is a 10-meter side cut radius, but this is a 74. So that 10-meter radius isn't quite like most 10-meter boards that are like a 162. This is a little more turny than the side cut would lead you to believe. And I found that while it likes more down the line, longer drawn out turns, it's not fully a straight liner, and it can make some really fun medium radius turns to across the groomer carves. And if you want to do a circle carve, you need a lot of room, but it can be done. And I just really love this turning experience. And if you want to just really open it up and make those longer, drawn out S turns on into a straight line and go really fast, this is really damp between the feet. The nose might clounce you a touch, but it quiets up pretty fast. And this has a nice, fast, all black base with only a little die cut here. I'm not gonna complain. Nidecker always does well with their bases, especially their high-end bases. This is great. Now let's talk powder. I would love to keep this because this is the kind of board I want on a super deep day. And while it's not super wide and not super tapered, it has a lot of setback on board. I would set this all the way back, and this has such a long, floaty, easy nose with so much early rise. And it's a 74. So for me at Bachelor on those ultra deep days, this is going to be the kind of board I want, because long boards do really, really well in low angle powder. This wouldn't be the board I'd want for turning in really tight tree lines, but Bachelor doesn't have much or any of that. So if you have some wide open spaces and you want really easy directional float and a board that will carry its speed when you get in those flat-ish sections, this is a great choice. So overall, I was a little hesitant with this board, late season like it was. I wasn't gonna even do a review, but I had so much fun on it. And it's a board that reminded me of the Legend 168 and 174. It was such a special board for me at that time. It's a board I'd like to own in my quiver, and I think a lot of you could really have a good time with this in low angle powder and wide open groomers. Everything else, maybe not so much, but it's a great board to have in your quiver.